The Glen of Gloom, Book 14. This is the Glen of Gloom. There are no green plants in this glen. There are no garden flowers, just twisty trees, brown weeds, and some clusters of orange and yellow mushrooms sticking up from the mud and clay. Animals never stray into the Glen of Gloom. They all stay away. The glen is gloomy and dim. Steep and towering cliffs shut out the rays of the sun. Beginning at the top of the glen, where the sun's rays can still be seen, a crooked footpath goes twisting downhill. Before this pathway gets to the bottom of the glen, it meets a barrier of prickly bushes. These bushes are thickly crowded together. They bend across the path like the roof of a very prickly subway tunnel. As the path comes out of this tunnel, it meets a number of jagged rocks. It zigzags past these rocks and keeps on twisting down the glen until it comes to a still and stagnant pool. This pool is a funny colour. It is not blue like the River Mac. It is green, and it is very smelly. Next to the pool, a rocky cliff towers up. It stands out like a bad and rotting tooth. At the foot of this rocky tower, there is a bent and twisted tree. Next to the tree, there is the black mouth of a deep cave. This cave seems to frown at the rest of the glen, as if the cave is angry. Little animals stay away from the Glen of Gloom because of this cave. Something nasty stays here. Something very, very wicked. Now it was the day after the Clan MacFuzz had been on their picnic. It was midday, but down in the bottom of the glen, everything was as gloomy and creepy looking as ever. At first, everything was still. The green pool was smooth and glassy. There was no sound. Then, something very odd began to happen. A soft, growling sound seemed to come from deep within the cave. The growls stopped. All was still again. Then, suddenly, whoosh! A freezing gust of wind came howling out of the cave's mouth. It blasted powerfully across the top of the pool and between the jagged rocks. Soon, the prickly bushes were bowing and swaying as the first gusts hit them. Before long, the glen was ringing with howls and screeches as the powerful wind blasted past the cliff tops. Showers of grit and powdery dust went scattering across the glen, battering and clattering against the bigger rocks and cliffs. Then the wind stopped, just as suddenly as it began. The Glen of Gloom was still again. But not for long. A thin yellow mist came creeping across the glen. Just like the wind, the mist too was coming from the cave. It came oozing out at first in little wisps and went trickling across the top of the still green pool. Then it came faster and faster, until it was gushing out at a fantastic speed, like a river coming out of a tunnel. Before long the glen was flooded. The mist was damp, chilly, and clammy. It looked as if the trees and bushes were drowning as little by little they sank into the thick yellow flood. The mist lay across the glen like a big yellow blanket of fluffy cotton wool. In the bottom of the glen, nothing could be seen. The cave had gone, so had the pool. The jagged rocks had gone, so had the prickly bushes. Everything was hidden by the thick yellow mist. Then, just as suddenly as the wind had come and gone, the mist stopped flooding out of the mouth of the cave. Soon the last wisps came trickling out. Bit by bit, the thick yellow blanket began to get thinner. Before too long, the last thin strands were drifting past the steep cliffs and up the crooked path. At last, all the mist had gone. Everything in the glen was still again. But the Glen of Gloom seemed to be expecting something. Every rock, twig, rush, and reed was still. The glen was soundless. Then, suddenly, from deep within the sooty blackness of the cave, a hissing sound began. The bent and twisted tree next to the cave began to shiver. Its thick wooden trunk began to twitch and jerk. Its roots shook. The reeds and rushes on the banks of the pool were shivering too. Then, little by little, something came creeping out of the cave. 2 hungry, red eyes were looking out of the gloom. They had no pity. They were bloodshot and angry. Now a long, sleek neck came stretching out. The thing stopped. Its ugly head began to sway this way and that way. Its greedy red eyes looked across the glen. They did not blink. They did not flicker. They inspected everything. The Glen of Gloom was very, very still. Not one twig was trembling. Not one reed was swaying. The green pool was as flat and smooth as glass. At long last the thing began to creep out again. Now all of its body could be seen. The thing was a glossy black monster. It had no legs and no feet. At the end of its body was a long, thin tail. Its skin was smooth and wet-looking. A jagged red crest stood up from the back of its neck. The thing looked as slippery as an eel. It slid along smoothly on its belly like a serpent. The monster lifted up its ugly head, and its crafty eyes inspected the glen from end to end. They saw everything. They looked at every bush, every rock, every speck of dust. Now the monster bent its head. It was looking at the rocks at the mouth of its cave. A soft snuffling sound drifted across the glen. The thing was sniffing. Its nostrils were twitching like the nostrils of a dog. The monster grunted and lifted up its head. A long, red tongue came shooting out of a mouth full of snapping, wet teeth. Its neck began to sway. Its eyes were getting redder and redder. Then, suddenly, 2 powerful jets of thick, yellow mist came shooting out of its nostrils.
"Hiss!"
said the thing.
"Hiss!"
Its tail was flicking angrily.
"Hiss! Yesterday something came straying down into my glen, and somehow they got away again. We cannot have this."
The monster slid along to the banks of the green pool. It looked down into the deep green water so that it could see itself.
Look at me.
the thing hissed.
I am the sagron.
The monster looked up at the steep, towering cliffs.
I am the sagron, queen of this glen.
She hissed.
Someone has been snooping and prowling down here. Now they must pay for it. No one may enter my glen and get away scot-free. I hunt and slay everything that comes on to my land. Nothing can get away from me. I am much too powerful.
She looked very angry indeed. The sagron looked back at the still green pool.
Green pool, I want to ask you a question.
She hissed.
Why did you let the prowlers get away?
As soon as the sagron stopped saying these words, the pool began to froth up. A nasty green gas came bubbling up from the thick mud at the bottom of the pool. A horrid stink drifted across the glen. The top of the pool was frothing and splashing. Drops of filthy green water came showering down on the sagron. The water in the pool itself began to go a brownish colour as more and more mud came bubbling up from the bottom. But the green pool did not answer the sagron's question. The sagron hissed again and said,
Why didn't you trap their feet in your thick, sticky mud? Why didn't you suck them under and drown them? I am very angry. Never let them get away from here again.
Saying no more, the sagron slid across to the jagged rocks.
Jagged rocks. I want to ask you a question.
She hissed.
Why did you let the prowlers get away?
The jagged rocks were still. They did not answer the sagron's question. The sagron's long, thin body twisted in anger.
Why didn't you cut them and rip them?
She said.
Why didn't you catch them and keep them? I am very angry. Never let them get away from here again.
Hissing and spitting, the sagron went slithering up the crooked path. At last she came to the prickly bushes. She shook the jagged red crest on the back of her neck and said,
Prickly bushes. I want to ask you a question. Why did you let the prowlers get away?
The prickly bushes began to droop and shiver. Their roots shook, but they did not answer.
Why didn't you scratch their eyes, prick their skin, and trip their feet. I am very angry. Never let them get away from here again.
Now the sagron looked at the rest of the glen. Her blood-red eyes were glittering and flashing. Her long tongue came flickering out of her mouth. A soft growl came from deep within her.
Glen of Gloom,
she hissed.
This must not happen again. I will not allow crowds of snoopers to come down here and then get away without paying for it. They must stay here and answer to me. Does everyone understand that?
The sagron had lost her temper. Her mouth was frothing. Her teeth were snapping. Her tail was swishing. The red crest on the back of her neck was stiff and angry.
You must trap everything you see and keep them for me. I am your queen. You must do as I say. I am not playing with you. Now I must catch these snoopers by myself.
With an angry scowl at the prickly bushes, the sagron slid.
Now then,
she said.
What are they called? Mac something. Now what can it be? Mac Buzz? No. Mac Muzz? No. Mac Guzz? No. Mac Was? No. Mac Tuz? No. What are they called? Mac Fuzz? Yes. Yes, that's it. Mac Fuzz. They are called the Clan Macfuzz, and they live in the next glen. They play the bagpipes and eat haggis, and their chief is called Macfuzz the Buzz.
Her body twisting and looping in anger, the sagron began to slither back into her cave. Thick jets of mist shot from her nostrils. Her eyes were flashing. Her teeth were snapping. Her tail was swishing. Hissing and spitting, she stopped at the mouth of the cave. She looked back at the crooked path that led to the Glen Macfuzz.
Well,
she hissed. The words came spitting from her lips.
Well, Clan Macfuzz, you had better look out. I am not going to come after you today, but you will soon be praying that you had never set eyes on the Glen of Gloom. You will be sorry that you ever came to bother me. I am in a very bad mood, and soon, very soon, I am going to swoop down on you. I would just love to catch you all. I will keep you for weeks in the blackest room in my cave. You will be like castaways. You will never see your Glen again. You will stay in my cave forever. I will have you all in my power. Then I will play nasty tricks on you. Your flesh will creep, and your teeth will chatter.
The sagron was so angry that she was screeching now. The sound of her words went ringing round the glen.
I will shower you with red-hot rocks! I will spray you with freezing water! You will pray for food, but you will get nothing to eat! I may let you have some rotten hay to sit on, but you will get no sleep! You will bow down before me and beg me to set you free! You will howl and weep! You will growl and creep, but it will be no good. In the end, you will shrivel up like rotten apples. I will have payment in full. Yes, yes, you silly fools. We will meet again, and then you will pay, pay, pay.
And, with one more look at the glen, her keen eyes missing nothing, the sagron began to slither back into the cool blackness of her cave. She went deep, deep down, until just the flicker of her eyes could be seen. She stopped hissing and spitting. Her teeth stopped snapping. Her tail stopped swishing. She was very, very still. Soon her eyelids slid down. Now nothing could be seen. But the sagron was still there, deep within her gloomy cave. She was not sleepy. She was not drowsy. She was thinking deeply. She was brooding and planning. She would stay in her cave for days, plotting and planning ways of catching the clan. And then, one day, she would be ready, and she would come swooping down on their little houses. And maybe then, if her plan was a good one, that would be the end of the Clan MacFuzz. They would never be happy again. Now write. Answer all the questions. Do not forget where to put full stops and capital letters. Question 1. What plants are there in the Glen of Gloom? Question 2. Where did the freezing wind come from? Question 3. What did the twisted tree begin to do just before the monster came out of the cave? Question 4. What color are the monster's eyes? Question 5. What sticks up from the monster's neck? Question 6. What comes out of the monster's nostrils? Question 7. What is the monster called? Question 8. Why was the monster angry with the green pool, the jagged rocks, and the prickly bushes? Question 9. Why did the monster go back into her cave? Question 10. Read these words: head, feet, tongue, hands, tail, skin, fingers, mouth, legs, eyes, wings, teeth, crest. Write down the things that the monster does not have.